Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Tarmack. This is the Feedback Loop. Today, we are going to be talking about gambling and video games. And as it turns out, gambling and video games actually has a pretty connected, almost like, conjoined twins kind of connected history. And a lot of people don't know about that. All they see is they see people talking about Overwatch loot boxes and how that's awful and it's gambling and it's terrible. And then they see these different sites popping up about Counter-Strike Go skins and, oh, this is gambling and this is terrible. And, I guess you could make an argument for that, especially being as there are a lot of children, or more specifically, people under the age of either 18 or 21, depending on where you live, that are not allowed to gamble because they're deemed to be the impressionable youth, or, take your pick, pick your excuse. It really doesn't make much difference to me. But if you go back far enough to look into how gambling became such a core part of video games, because really, as you go back through all of the history of games, you're going to find gambling mechanics in every game genre, all the way back years, decades. Okay, we're talking back to the beginning. There's this company called Bally. Way back in the beginning of all things video games. They were back in like the 60s and stuff like that, and they were making slot machines. They also started making pinball machines, and then they bought a company called Midway that you may have heard of, the original owners of the Mortal Kombat franchise, among others. They started making the upright arcade cabinets, and Bally wasn't the only one. Konami is another company that you may have heard of. You may be familiar with their work. You hear about them making pachinko machines now and how this is some kind of new thing that people are surprised by. Well, shit, they were making slot machines and pachinko machines before they made video games. Video games are new for Konami and companies like Midway and Bally and them. Midway was then bought by another company called Williams. Williams is also known as WMS. They're one of the biggest slot machine manufacturers on the planet, one of the most well-known. And throughout that history of dealing with these different companies that do both slot machines, or maybe I should say the three things, the slot machines, the pinball machines, and the upright arcades, as upright arcade games and arcade games in general started to die off, and you've got this kind of conjoined culture, and I've used that word twice now, but this sort of mixed culture of gaming, right? Gaming in the traditional sense is gambling. That's what it, if you look at any legal text talking about gambling, they call it gaming. You have the same people that programmed and built these games back in the day. The same people that were building arcade games were working beside the same people that were building slot machines. It was just part of the culture. This was the business at the time. Arcades started to die off. And as arcades started to die off, those game developers went on to form the first game companies, first console manufacturers. Atari was an absolute behemoth in the upright arcade game market. Tons of games, tons of games. And so as arcades start to die, they start to make consoles, they start to make PC games, they start to make all of these different things. And it's the same people that are making those games. So why would anyone be surprised that video games, which started as companies making slot machines for Vegas and take your pick elsewhere, moved into making arcade games, which were based on the same mechanic, put in a quarter, get a bit of play, put in another quarter, get a bit of play. This is the same shit, except that the arcade cabinet doesn't give you money back. It was for amusement only. You'll actually see that on some arcade games. And those people then go on to make video games. And so the original video games on the Nintendo, Super Nintendo, take your pick, all of that old console stuff, Commodore 64, Atari 2600, all of this sort of thing, they started off with these 3 lives. Every game had 3 lives. Well, every arcade game had 3 lives. Then they started adding in continues. You could have continues, but they didn't need to get a quarter from you, so they could just give you a few continues to start with. This is the game generation that I grew up with. I'm a terribly, terribly old man. And so games were more difficult. And you hear people talk about, oh, it was so much more difficult. Yeah, because that's terrible goddamn design. I'm going to make this game so that you die a couple of times and you get to go start over. Okay. I mean, games like FTL and Binding of Isaac and stuff like that have some value there because they're specifically designed around a progression system that's outside of the run that you're doing. But anyways, that's the thing. As you move further and further into the present day, you run into games where there is an actual overt gambling mechanic that's in the game. Now, games for a long time have dealt with the usual kinds of triggers of, not risk reward, but that kind of just one more level, just one more collectible. Right? This has been there forever. Just one more run. Diablo 2 was one of the early ones that I played that actually had a gambling mechanic specifically in it. There was an NPC that you could walk up to, and you would see the item name, and you would see not a whole lot else, and you could buy that item. And there were items that you could get that you could only get in that game by buying them through this gambling guy. And you would pay more than the normal price for an item, but you could also get junk. Right? This was how you would get the best rolls sometimes, but you had to put a lot of gold into it to get that kind of stuff. This kind of conditioning of moving in the direction of some degree of gambling content has been going on for absolutely ever. It's been going on for decades. Right? This is not some kind of new thing that has just started because Blizzard decided to put loot boxes in their game. But let's talk about the loot boxes. All a loot box represents is a basic psychological trigger in the brain. You get a loot box. It opens. You see shiny things popping up all over the place. And then you see other people in the game playing with that wonderful skin that you wanted. You see the crazy animation along with that awesome skin that you wanted. You are constantly being shown all of the awesome stuff that you don't have. And oddly, if you do have a really cool skin, it's not always as noticeable as somebody's skin in the game that maybe you don't have when you see it in that play of the game, or take your pick. Doesn't really matter. And so by having Blizzard reinforce that all the time, and this is kind of one of the arguments that I go back to when I say that loot boxes are not an ethical thing, and gambling mechanics in games are not an ethical thing, is because it's a manipulation. It's a brain failure, right? They have convinced you that you want something that you don't need. You have no reason to buy a loot box in a game. Why would you need to buy it? Well, because they've put it there. And then they make it even worse by making it so that the chances of getting the things that you want are incredibly low. This is a bit of a problem to me. This is something that bothers me a great deal about it. To say that loot boxes do not affect gameplay, from a strict mechanical sense perhaps, but when you're constantly exposed to it, and when you can't necessarily get the thing that you want easily without spending a ridiculous amount of currency, when you get a whole bunch of trash things repeatedly that you don't get any kind of reward for, all of those sprays and nonsense. At this point, I'm getting, every box I open has a duplicate of some kind in it, and it's all trash. And then they move on to a game, in the case of Blizzard, that used to have a good monetization. I genuinely thought, in my opinion, that Heroes of the Storm had a good monetization model. The heroes were way too expensive. Like, that was absolutely crazy. They should have been much, much cheaper than that. But the only way that you could get those heroes was to buy them. You could play a ton of games, get some gold, and you could spend that gold, or you just say, hey, here's my credit card. I don't have any time or patience for that. I want that character. Give me that character right now. And Blizzard would give it to you. But then that wasn't enough. It wasn't enough money for them. Heroes wasn't doing well enough. So now we're going to have this wonderful 2.0 update, this sort of odd implication that the game has actually been changed so that now it's just gambling. That's all they did. Right? That's what Blizzard 2.0 or Heroes of the Storm 2.0 is taking Heroes of the Storm and adding gambling. That's it. That's all they added to Heroes of the Storm. If you really look at it, they didn't change the game at all. There are still some ways where you can get characters directly, and that's fine. But all they did was add loot boxes, shiny loot boxes, to try and convince people that that they need to buy a whole bunch of loot boxes because they might get awesome stuff or they might get crap. Pretty much what happened to me when I went through it, and then I uninstalled the game afterwards. One of the comments that I got, and I'm pronouncing this is going to be a little bit difficult, but I think it's Auix, A-U-Y-X. It's an individual saying that their biggest issue with gambling and games is the masses of gambling style hooks in kids games and even, you know, YouTube videos aimed at kids. These things provoke a little mental reward that I think could set kids who are susceptible to be more likely to get in trouble later in life. And I tend to agree. I find the idea of video games marketing to children with the same tactics that they use to market to adults in gambling to be absolutely abhorrent. I find this to be ridiculous nonsense. This is something that is frustrating absolutely to no end. But at the same time, what makes it good when it's just adults? If your game is not good enough to be fun to play, and you have to introduce some kind of mechanic into the game that makes people want to play, not because it's fun, but because you've got some kind of, you know, hey, if you come back tomorrow, you'll get a free pack, or you'll get a free level, or you'll get a free this or a free that. That's casino language. That's come down to Vegas. We'll give you a free room. Make sure to bring that $1,000 with you so that you can play some slot machines or play some craps or roulette. But we'll give you a free room and some free meals. This is tried and true. This is basic marketing 101 in the gaming industry, not video gaming industry, casino gaming industry. Whitehawk, also one of my backers and moderator type folks, also had a bit of a comment talking back when Auix was mentioning that, saying the other thing that really bothers me about this is how few consequences people get even when they're caught red-handed. There was this massive blow up in CSGO last year with Pro Syndicate and other people, but they're still around and doing fine, almost unscathed from their bullshit. Yeah. That's how a lot of corporate lawsuits and stuff goes. It almost looks like Volkswagen is still running just fine, doesn't it? Even though they had these massive issues relating to the emissions falsifying that they were doing. Absolutely crazy. But the comment about CSGO, and this kind of transitions me into what I really wanted to hit upon here, is Valve, more so than Blizzard. I mean, Blizzard, you look at Blizzard and all of their games, Hearthstone, Overwatch, Heroes of the Storm, all have loot box style things, packs and boxes, you know, nonsense like that. Every Blizzard game is going to have that. And that's bad. But you know what? You can make it without dealing with that. That's totally fine. Valve, on the other hand, I have a theory, and I'd like to share that theory with you. A little while back, I was taking a look at a lot of the different CSGO gambling issues, right? And so Valve has been a part of a lawsuit alongside the Pro Syndicate, T. Martin nonsense. And if you don't know, here's how that went. There were a couple of streamers that played CSGO a whole lot. And in CSGO, you'll get crates as you're playing. I don't really know quite how they're unlocked, but it has to do with you're playing or you're watching certain CSGO events or whatever the case. You get these crates. And the only way that you can unlock that crate is by going onto the Steam Marketplace and you buy a key. That key goes in the crate, you unlock the crate, you get a little side-scrolling, sort of slot machine-esque looking thing, single reel, that scrolls by and scrolls by and scrolls by and then shows you that you got a particular skin. You won a skin. Well, now you can take that skin and you can trade it to somebody else on the marketplace, right? You can sell it on the marketplace. You could just give it to a friend. You can kind of do whatever you want with it. And so a number of different other sites started opening up to allow and trying to deal with the Steam API to allow people to trade these things more easily. And then it wasn't long before somebody got the idea, hey, what if we let people gamble their skins? What if we let people bet on something and they have a reward of a skin? They put in a few bucks, they might win something worth $1,000. And then it got even worse. Then you'd have these big CSGO streamers that were doing gambling streams. That's all they were doing. They were showing themselves opening boxes or what have you, and showing themselves gambling on these sites. Hey guys, I found this really neat site where you can gamble your skins. Watch me come and gamble my skins. And then it turned out that a couple of individuals owned the site that they were gambling on, which would allow them to, game the system a little bit. It didn't have to be an honest gamble anymore. It just had to be visible as one, right? They could control the odds. They knew exactly how many bets they would need to make in order to win. And then they go and they freak out on stream. Oh my God, I won $1,000 CSGO knife skin. It doesn't matter. Take your pick. Right? This is absolute, beyond reason, fraudulent nonsense. Right? They are advertising a site. So first of all, we've got this issue where they're advertising a site that they own by not saying that they own it. But then they're advertising a gambling site that has no restrictions for minors. Anybody can go on this thing, right? So you've got the lack of a gambling license, you've got the lack of disclosure, and all manner of other things. And so then Valve, along with these fools, gets sued. And Valve is still fighting this to try and say, hey, we have nothing to do with this. And there was a bunch of changes that Valve rolled out saying, you know what? This is nonsense. If you are running a gambling site, we want nothing to do with you. We're going to do whatever we have to legally to distance ourselves and shut you down. Fine. So, Valve, what about your own gambling system? See, here's my problem. Here's my issue that I have with Steam and the Steam marketplace. In Washington State, and I'm going to show you something here. I'm going to show you a little page from the gambling regulations in Washington State. Gambling, as used in this chapter, means staking or risking something of value upon the outcome of a contest of chance or a future contingent event not under the person's control or influence, upon an agreement or understanding that the person or someone else will receive something of value in the event of a certain outcome. And then it goes on to list a couple of things like fishing derbies and things that are not included, basically anything that is, a game of chance, but also a game of skill. So I'm risking something of value upon the outcome of a contest of chance or future contingent event not under my control, upon an agreement or understanding that I might get something of value in return if luck happens to go my way. That's what gambling is. This is actually something that's very common. This is a normal way of defining gambling in most jurisdictions. It's the same basic kind of thing. In Alberta, where I live, you go around the world. This is what gambling means. I'm putting money down, and there's a possibility that I will come out of this transaction with something of more value than the money that I put down. So on Steam, you have all of these different boxes for CSGO. You have the keys that you have to buy. The keys, to me, are something of value. I have to pay you money, Valve, via your marketplace, in order to have a key. I then take that key and I open a lockbox. That lockbox has a random chance. It's even a nice little side-scrolling, almost like a slot machine reel. It shows me all of the things that I might have won, including the one that I did, but all of the other ones that I might have won. Very odd choice. And then I get something, and that something has a value. It has some value to it. I can put that up on the marketplace. I can sell that. I might get a skin that's worth $1,000. I might get a skin that's only worth 2 cents, 3 cents. It's entirely possible. And the outcome of that is out of my control. I'm not able to influence whether or not I get a good skin or a bad skin. Does this sound like a regular transaction, a regular buying of a product to you, or does it sound an awful lot like gambling? Now, a lot of people will go back and they will try and poke a few holes in this argument, and there are a couple of holes and things to be aware of. Right? The argument goes, what about Magic the Gathering? I can go down to the store and I can buy a pack of Magic cards. In that pack of Magic cards, there might be, what is it, the Black Lotus or some kind of Lotus thing? There's some card that's worth a ridiculous amount of money. That might be in there. That's like a jackpot. If I get that card, I don't know what's in the pack. Is that gambling? Well, no. And the reason why is because what you're being given is a product. The reason it has value is because of the rarity, but also that it is a collector's item. It is a product, a physical thing that you can pick up and you can hold. And so there is a difference between what Magic does with their cards and what Steam does with the skins. Now, the other difference is that there is no secondary market for Magic cards that has anything to do with Magic the Gathering itself. All secondary markets are from customer to customer. I have a rare card. I'm going to sell it to somebody else who wants that rare card. Sometimes the customer might be like a card shop or something like that. Sometimes it's another player. Sometimes it's somebody on eBay. Take your pick, doesn't matter, right? And granted, maybe this Black Lotus card is not a common thing. I see somebody in chat commenting that, good luck. But anyways, I sell that to somebody else and Magic is not involved. The company that owns the brand is not involved. They have nothing to do with it. So what we have is we have two major differences between the scenario of the Magic cards, Pokemon cards, none of those, it doesn't matter. They're all the same basic thing. And the Valve system, where the market is controlled by Valve, they own the marketplace. They take a cut of every card sale. They take a cut of every skin sale, every item on that store. Valve takes a cut of. And they also directly influence the rarity of items. They can increase or decrease the rarity at will to change the prices if they so wish. And I know that a lot of this starts to sound a little bit conspiratorial. I don't mean to say that they are manipulating this to try and create some kind of crazy profit. My view on this is actually that they didn't bother to look into whether or not they could do what they're doing. Because I'm reasonably convinced, as I mentioned, that this definition of gambling applies to what Valve does on their store. Staking or risking something of value. A couple of bucks for a key. That's my bet. That's what I'm paying. That's my entry fee into the sweepstakes, into the lottery. And then I get something of value. Might be a high value, might be a low value. Now, there is one more argument. And that's the argument of a minimum price. So every skin has a minimum value or something along those lines that you're never going to get zero. And there is, this is an item that is worth debating. I'm sure that they would bring that up in a courtroom if it was ever to go that far. That any bet in a casino will have a % chance of a zero outcome, right? And so the argument goes that if you have always a positive outcome, even though it's less than perhaps what you paid in, that it may not be gambling. But frankly, I don't see a big distinction there. And the funny thing about all of these, these different things like CSGO and all of that kind of stuff, is the audience. That was one of the things that really threw me. The audience watches it, but at the same time, it's funny, and this might blow your mind. I'll show you this as well. There are people that watch videos of other people winning money on slot machines. There's 31,000 views on here's a video. I don't want to show no ad or any of that kind of nonsense, but we have a video with like 30,000 views, 4,000, 11,000. This is another genre on YouTube, just like people watching on Twitch to say that you know, they're doing their own gambling, they're opening their own crates. So the last thing that I wanted to talk about to try and bring this home a little bit is that there is no way to cash out your Steam credit. There's no way to get your cash in hand, except if you go to one of these third-party sites. And so Valve will say, and this is their argument with the CSGO, we can't control these other places. We're not involved. We don't support them. We don't want them. None of that kind of stuff. But let's go back to our definition here. Okay. What it says is that someone will receive something of value. Okay, something of value. Let's go back to their definitions. Let's take a look at a thing of value. Thing of value, as used in this chapter, means any money or property, any token, object, or article exchangeable for money or property. Steam credit can buy you games. As a result, Steam credit is a thing of value. It may not be cash. It may not actually be money in your pocket that you can withdraw and put in your bank account, but it is definitely a thing of value. In sweepstakes and lotteries and things like this, a gift card can be given as a win, an item that you have successfully won. And that gift card is still gambling. And getting that gift card instead of cash, that's still gambling. That doesn't change anything. And then, to make matters even worse, the idea of a product. You go back to the cards example. You have a product. This is something that gets them out of it. Well, you know what? You have a skin. That's like a product, right? I have a skin. I can choose to sell it or I can use it myself. Well, what about the Valve definition of whether or not you own your skins? Quoting from the Steam subscriber agreement that we all agree to when we set up our Steam account. Section D, trading and sales of subscriptions between subscribers. Quote, you also understand and acknowledge that subscriptions traded, sold, or purchased in any subscription marketplace are license rights, that you have no ownership interest in such subscriptions, and that Valve does not recognize any transfers of subscriptions, including transfers by operation of law, that are made outside of Steam. So what they're telling you is that you have to pay and you get temporary credit for something that you sell that belongs to Valve. You never actually own the skin. You just have a license for it. Do you see why I look at this situation and I don't see any possibility that Valve is not operating an unlicensed gambling operation via the Steam marketplace, specifically related to Counter-Strike Go and any product that they have that uses the crate and key model that then can have that item sold on the marketplace. Now, it would be a totally different scenario if that item was locked to your account. All of a sudden, that's fine. Account-bound stuff, that's fine. You're not allowed to transfer your account. You're not allowed to get rid of that skin. It's locked to your account. Now you're not gambling. You're not gambling for something of value. But the moment that Valve decided we can make millions of dollars every year, and my estimates, I'm sure that they're making at least $1 million a day on the marketplace transactions. We can make tons and tons and tons of money by allowing people to sell these items. Well, yeah, that's gambling, guys. You're making people pay a fee to get something of value that they don't own, that they can sell for Steam credit that they can then use to buy games. This is risking something of value in exchange or a contest of chance where you can get something else of value. This is gambling. This always has been gambling. It's always been a problem. And until Valve does something about it, because quite frankly, on Steam, you have younger folks. I think you have to be 13 to have a Steam account. You don't have to be 18, but you got to be 18 or 21 to gamble. So it's a little bit of a problem. Anyways, that's all that I wanted to say for the moment about gambling in video games. I hope that it was informative, educational, perhaps even useful. Thank you for coming by and taking a look at this wonderful little feedback loop topic for me today. My name is Tarmack. Feel free to follow me at Tarmack Gaming on twitch.tv to come by and actually tune in live. These things are recorded on Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, although there's usually a little bit of gameplay before that. This will be going up on the channel for patron folks tomorrow night as soon as I'm done with this, and then on Saturday for everybody else. And then the next feedback loop topic we will announce on Sunday during the news wrap-up. So if you have any comments or questions, perhaps suggestions for new feedback loop topics, feel free to drop a comment down below the video. I would absolutely love to read your comments on these topics. It's always a joy to try and incorporate some things into the discussion, and maybe even pick a topic that, that someone else has in mind. So thanks very much for checking this out. I hope you enjoyed it. And now I'm going to get back to dying horribly and killing viewers in FTL, because that's how the last couple of runs went, and I'm sure that whatever runs happen after this are going to be just as bad. Cheers. Bye-bye.